Hello and welcome to another Microsoft tutorial. Now in this tutorial we'll be going over on how to fix there's a current bug with our code that if you try to join a server with our code, anybody who joins, they're going to be stuck at a loading screen. And that's kind of annoying, especially when we're going to start doing weapons testing and start making our weapons actually shoot and do damage to other players. It's pretty important that we actually have functionality to be able to join another player's server and move around. So I'm just going to go through a quick demo of what I'm talking about. If you want to set up a server on your computer and do client testing on the same computer without having to drag out another computer or having to send your code to a friend and go, hey, test this. There's this button in the Unreal front end called Server. And you go ahead and click that. It's going to load whatever map. You click in map to play. I'm going to drag this to the corner here. And it doesn't look much, but you're in your world, the same as what we've been doing, and you're going to fires, and there's a little light glow, like we said in the last tutorial. However, if you go, more instances might load if you have a number of clients, such as something that's not 0. But I like to set it at 0 because that way my screen doesn't pop up with all these clients that I don't need. But I want to go ahead and click this drop down here and go add client, and that's automatically going to make it a little client that will connect to your server. And here we go, we're connected. And as you can see, it's going to be stuck at first or your loading screen, due to its default loading screen. Now, if you notice something interesting, if you move your mouse on the screen, in the other client, you can tell that we're rotating. And hell, you can even move around just like this. So we are in our game, but we just can't see anything because this loading screen's in our way. But it is working. So yeah, it's functional, you just can't see anything. So that's what we're going to be fixing. And now I'll say we left the game because our client closed. Then click this. Alright, so in order to fix that, we have to figure out how Epic's doing that, because if you derive from Epic's code from UT game info and stuff like that, it doesn't do that. So at first, it's kind of tricky to figure out what's causing that to not happen. So I want to go ahead and, because it's a loading movie that is kind of blocking our way, I'm just going to go ahead and do a full text search for the phrase movie in all our classes, just to see what we get. We get kind of a lot of stuff here. Get kind of a lot of stuff, 167 matches. I'm going to go ahead and bring this up, and I'm going to drag this up here. So let's just go down our list and see what we got. Now, player controller, we can skip that because we're looking for anything UT specific, because we're deriving from these upper level or these lower level classes. So it's not in any of these, like game player controller. First one is UT player controller. Let's go ahead and click this top result and see what happens. And stop any movies currently playing before you quit out. Well, we're not quitting out, so that's not really relevant. But that line might be useful later. So we keep going to the next results, and here you go. What's this? Called when the GRI stands for Game Replication Info, finishes processing custom character meshes. And let's just take a look at what's in here because we're already here. It looks like we are closing, or we're getting the name or a string of the last movie that we have open. And if it's a loading movie, or that's how Epic decided to name other Unreal Tournament loading movies, having this in the beginning of their strings, we will close it. And that's kind of exactly what we need. So this is the function we're looking for. Luckily it was in the first class that we looked for, and we didn't have to dig through everything else. So with that there, we are in UT player controller. That means we have to add this functionality to our player controller. So let's go ahead and take a look at this function that we're in, character processing complete. So I want to go ahead and see if that's declared up in a higher level, or like so you could say a lower level parent class, to see if that function is already defined higher or defined for us, because we don't want to recreate functions we don't really need. So I'm going to go ahead and player controller find. Okay, this is UT player controller. I'm going to look at UDK player controller, and UDK player controller does not have a function for character complete processing. So I'm going to look at game player controller, and it doesn't have one either. Then I'm going to look up at player controller and go down to functions, and it does not have one either. So I'm going to go to controller and see if it has one, and it does not have one either. So this is a UT specific implementation of this function. So we're going to have to figure out how they implemented it in this code. So now that we're back to our function, character processing complete, all I want is to be able to close the menu. I don't need any of this other stuff because it's just stuff we don't need and stuff we don't even care about. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and copy this entire function anyway. And I want to open up our player controller. Here's our player controller. And I'm just going to paste that right in. Boom. And I'm going to go ahead and delete this block and this block because we don't need them, because I don't really care what they do. All we want is this block right here. So I'm going to go ahead and save this, and there's some local variables that we can now get rid of because we don't need any for these, because we got rid of those other code blocks. And it looks like the only local variable we're using here is last movie, which is this variable right here. I'm going to go ahead and strip out these other three. And then I want to save it just like that. Now, because this is defined in UT Player Controller and not in any class above it, we have to figure out how this is called. So I'm going to go ahead and do another full text search, and I'm going to just go, I'm going to copy this right here just like this, paste it right in here, and I'm going to just search for all classes for it. And you'll see the first result I have on mine is HT Player Controller, but that's something I wrote up, so don't worry about that. That's what we will be writing up soon. The first result you should get is UT Player Controller, and we have this init input system, and this looks like a good place to put it. In fact, it is in Player Controller. I didn't even know about this before. How about that? So I'm going to go ahead and put this in our code, because that sounds good. So I'm going to go ahead and copy paste this entire thing. And in our player controller, I'm going to paste this right in here. And I'm just going to delete all this code I don't need. We're going to need super dot in the input system. That runs whatever is the function declared higher up. So I like to have that functionality, whatever that does. Let's not delete that. But the only code I really care about right here is the character processing complete function call, because that's all I'm interested in, and whatever isn't, we can add later if we need it. So I'm going to save it. I want to go back to Uncodex, and I want to go see what else we got here. Then we have the actual definition. Then we have UT game replication info, and we have a hit here for set timer. Looks pretty much like the same other function, but it's a timer for it. And then in this, underneath this, I guess our next two hits, is another character processing complete function. So this looks pretty important. But in order to figure out why it's doing here, we have to know some background info about UT game replication info. Now, when you join a game in Unreal, you are joining a server that hosts a game info type class, and that defines the rules for the game. But that's only on the server. What you get from the server is a game replication info class. Anytime you hear the term replication, it means generally variables that have to be sent from the server to the client or from the client to the server. Basically variables that have to be in sync on the network, and something that's not client-side or server-side only. So the game replication info stores values that are important for everybody to know real time about the game, such as scores and things like that. Let's just take a look at the top of this class and see what variables they use. Be story mode. It's pretty important to know that we're in a story mode, and see if announcements are disabled. Yeah, things like that. Just general variables that kind of affect gameplay, such as show menu on death, things like that. That's where you would put them, because game info doesn't get transferred. Only the name of the class gets transferred. The actual info that the server is using is in the game application info class. So, with that said, we're going to need to have some of our own game application info in the future, because when we develop our own game mode, we're going to need variables to be passed from the client to the server just regarding the game mode only. So if we're going to go ahead and implement this, their version of character processing complete as well, just so that we know, so just so we can get started on our UT replication info, or our HT replication info, that's what we're going to call it. So let's just take a look at the function that they have here instead, and you'll see that they have a local variable, UT player controller, and it's the next code block is looping through every local player controller that matches UT player controller, and it runs character processing complete on it. So this is basically another way to call our method right here, which disables our movie. So we can either disable our movie based on the input system being initialized, and honest, I didn't even know about this before, so that probably should work too. But if there's a case where our input system won't be initialized for whatever reason, we can go ahead and add, this functionality too. That way, after our game loads, we will quit our movie. And if you look back at the set timer, this set timer is declared in post begin play. And as we've been through before, post begin play is a function on any actor that gets called as soon as it's loaded up and it's ready for play, or after it sets itself up for ready to play. So basically, as soon as the character, or as soon as this actor is loaded, and this actor is given to you when you connect to a server, it will call this function. And in this function, we set a timer for 1 second to call this function, which closes our movie. So basically, after we connect, we have 1 second. We have a 1 second timer to close the movie. That way, things can buffer and things like that in that small time. Because even though while it's loaded, some textures take a little bit longer to stream, and it's nicer just to have 1 second delay. And notice how it will only work if it's not a dedicated server, because the dedicated server is not going to be dealing with loaded movies and things like that, so it has no need to do this. And you're only running this function on local player controllers, so only controllers on the client side who are connected to the server will quit their movie in this case. Because this function is ran on the client due to this simulated flag. It's run on both really, but because we're checking for local player controllers, it's only going to affect people locally. It's a lot of info, but we'll get more into replication later when we start doing more of our game mode stuff. But for now, you just need to know that this class is given, or this class is basically propagated to the client when they connect to a server, and post begin play is generally ran after everything's loaded and after they're ready to play. And this character processing complete function in replication info loops through all the local player controllers and runs this function here in our player controller, which we have stop our movie. So there you go. That's what all that does. So I'm going to go ahead and go to UT game replication info. Just check out its class hierarchy, and we'll find that is way. Where is this class at? Okay, it's under info, under replication info, under game replication info, under UT game replication info. So I'm going to go ahead and subclass game replication info, because that's the lower or highest level that's not UT. So I've already made my HT game replication info class, and it's blank right now. All I did was right click, create subclass, and I just create a new subclass. And we're going to go ahead and open that up. And here's the code right here, just empty class. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to Uncodex, open UT game info, go back to our result here, and I'm just going to copy paste this whole post begin play, because I'm too lazy to type out post begin play again. Just paste that right in there, and I'm going to delete everything except for this if statement that does what we want, and this super post begin play that runs whatever logic we need to run before we do our own logic. Pretty important we keep that there, just like I explained in the other class. Now, we're not using any local variables here, so we can go ahead and delete all these. Very cool, very cool. And save this. And then now we can go back to our function here and just take this function, which will automatically loop through all our local players and run this stop movie function. So back to game replication info, paste that in there. We're not using UT player controllers, we're using HT player controllers, so we're going to go ahead and switch our prefixes to HT instead of UT. There we go. Let's save. And that's it. That's all we need to stop for movie, because this function stops for movie, and it will be called after we initialize our input system or after we connect and are ready to play. So we can go ahead and make. And then we can go server. And bring this up. I want to move over here so we can spawn. Go ahead and add a client. And there we go. Hey! And I already added damage to my weapon, so people are actually dying and respawning. But we'll go over that in the next tutorial. Boom. Or, oops. Boom. Alright, so I thought it actually wouldn't work there, but because we didn't assign something, so let's go ahead and go back to, or for you it might not be working because it should not know that we're using our new game application info class. But if it does work, cool. But that might be just because our regular game info class is stopping that movie to begin with. So I'm going to go ahead and add this new line right here to our code. If you notice in the hunt game or the DK game, we have this default property that we commented up before. If you don't have it, you can go ahead and add it now. And it's game replication info class. Go ahead and assign that to our new replication info class, udkgame.ext game replication info. That way we're sure that we're using our game replication info class for our game replication info. And I did the same thing with UDK game. Go ahead and add that in there. And that should guarantee it to work. It shouldn't. I thought it wouldn't work before that, but make sure you have this in there. That way we know we're using our replication info class in both game modes that we have. Or if you only have one game mode, go ahead and just put that in that one game mode. And then for sure, it will definitely work. So I'm going to go ahead and click server. And around here, add a client. There we go. See, we're in the game. Loading screen's really quick. And we're able to move around and look through our player. And you can see what's going on here. And this mesh is just a mesh I'm using from a game. It doesn't have any animations, otherwise you would see the animations going on. And we also have to, there's a few things you can notice here. We have to work on our third-person weapon model, because that's not being shown. And for me, I have to work on my texture, because I don't know why it's all black. But that's just a personal fix. And then from there, we can work on actual gameplay stuff, and getting our weapons to do more cool things and things like that. Now, I've already gone ahead and changed my weapon code so that it does damage when you fire it. Now, we're going to go through that in the next tutorial, but the next tutorial will pretty much show you how to do something like this. You left click and boom, they're actually dead. But once again, I don't have any animation set, so look at my other screen. We're now in spectator mode, or kind of hovering over your corpse here. But yeah, and he also threw out his weapon on the ground and it kind of span away. But we haven't handled picking up weapons yet, so that's not going to do anything either. And corpses disappear over time by default. You can go ahead and left click here and respawn. You can go ahead and shoot our client again. Boom. So that's what we'll be doing in the next tutorial. Just giving our weapon damage. It's really, really, really simple. In fact, it's a default property switch. But I'll save that for next tutorial. Alright, so hopefully you can get your multiplayer game working so that we can start testing multiplayer aspects. Things like weapons and stuff. And you noticed this corpse is not really updating right. I mean, there is physics here, but yeah, it's just there's a whole bunch of animation stuff we gotta do too. So, alright, boom. So, have fun with that, and eventually we'll get, hey, there we go. Eventually we'll get a game going. Cool. Thanks for watching, and see you next tutorial. As soon as I can put these, I can stop recording. Ah.